Welcome to another Mindmaxing podcast. And I'm very glad to be here with Debra Iles, the Senior Associate Dean for Executive Education at the Harvard Kennedy School. And Debra and I have known each other for many years, and I've watched her grow the exec ed at Harvard Kennedy School and made some terrific pivots over the course of this year, especially, and would like to start off by welcoming Debra and asking, during this last very crazy year, what are some of your reflections from this year?
Hi, Lee. How are you? It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast. This is fun. Reflections on the past year. Well, I remembered several years ago, a group of us doing what we called at the time pandemic planning. I think it was after SARS happened and we were beginning to worry that this could be a thing. And we made a bunch of plans and then we, put them on the shelf because the pandemic didn't come, and went about our business growing and expanding and serving public leaders. And so I can't say I never expected to be in this situation, because obviously we were thinking about it, but a plan is only as good as the thing when it happens. And this was definitely something different from what we expected. We didn't expect to be locked down, but still mostly okay. We were envisioning something much more dramatic, more like a zombie apocalypse kind of scenario. So this has been different from what we expected, but obviously incredibly significant to our business. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, and so what are some things you noticed over the last year in terms of what you did that was successful, what your team did that was successful, or some things that were bigger challenges that you had expected?
Sure. So even before the pandemic, we were running about 4 or 5 online programs and had been for several years. And we run about 60 programs altogether. So a very small proportion were online. And we'd been pretty successful with them, but they were high touch programs. And it was always a business model that we just weren't sure what to do with it. And also, frankly, our faculty weren't that excited about teaching online when they had the alternative to teach on campus. So everything shut down very suddenly. We realized at that point when the pandemic began that it was going to be online or nothing. And, executive education, which is the space that I work in, has become a really important part of the whole business model for the Kennedy School, both for financial reasons, but even more importantly for mission reasons. The Kennedy School has always been a very active kind of place where the faculty are really trying to get ideas out into practice in the public sector. And so the idea of just not doing executive education for however long was really, that was a non-starter. We never really considered that. Instead, we had a very small group of faculty chairs who said, let's just try to put our programs online. We started out with a very simple model of, like, if the program was a week on campus, we ran a program that was a week long online. And we started there and just started getting some momentum. Very, very rapid iteration of modes and tools and techniques and approaches. And very gradually we made it work. And at this point now, as I look at the spring, the number of programs that we're running online are just about equivalent to the number of programs that we would have run on campus last spring. So it's amazing. The pace of change has been remarkable.
That is amazing. And I know some of the magnitude of some of these programs, so that's fantastic. And I also know that you guys have a huge impact worldwide, and because you work with leaders who then work with their constituents, and it serves a very important mission. So in the next 6 to 9 months, as you're now getting your sort of feet set of doing this and looking at the spring, and the spring's actually happening, and you've got it going on.
Yeah.
What are some things you're doing to either optimize or to improve upon, or new things based on your experience so far?
So the feedback that we've gotten from the people who've been involved in the programs, and we've had about 2,000 people go through our online programs so far, has been really positive, very encouraging. Many of them have said that they couldn't have come if we had run the programs on campus, because they just never could get the time away from the office, or, we're very international. They're from all over the world. And also, frankly, because of the pricing. One thing that we've done with our online programs is that we've reduced the price substantially, and that's made them more affordable. So while it's interesting that if you look at the demographics of our online participants on paper, they look the same. So we haven't seen a change in the demographic characteristics of the people that we've attracted, but we have had a lot of anecdotal feedback from these folks saying that they never could have come at the higher price point and on campus. So to your point about, the Kennedy School being, needing to serve the world, we're really, really pleased about that. In terms of what we're changing, we're kind of changing everything all the time. The thing that we're most focused on is how to build community, especially at a place like Harvard. In addition to the content that the students are learning, they're also really focused on building their peer network through participating in a program like this. So we've put a lot of attention on ways to make them feel like they are a cohort, they are a network, they're together, and they're getting to know each other, in addition to learning the materials. I'm happy to share with you a couple of examples. Okay, this is a podcast. Lee, you're nodding, so.
Oh, well, it's a video podcast. That would be great. Would you like to share some examples?
I would, thanks. So some of them are, just simple things, and others are more pedagogical in a sort of a classical sense. But some of the simple things we've been doing is like doing office hours online, doing receptions and coffee breaks, having scheduled time for people to stretch or take a walk. And a lot of times people will take a walk around wherever they are, take some pictures, and then they'll post the pictures onto the course site so people get a sense of where they are. One fun thing is we've been using a lot of music and playlists, and we've asked the participants to send music in, and then at the end we create a cohort playlist. And that's just creates another thing for people to talk about informally. We use some of our technology to make sure that everybody's participating, and the faculty have become really good at using the chat function to what they call warm call the participants. So they're not cold calling, they're just saying, answer this simple question in the chat, and then they'll pick up on something that came out and call on the person. Oh, I see that Lee wants to talk about X, Y, or Z. And then over the course of the whole program, they're making sure that everybody really is participating. Another tool that they're using pedagogically is we're using Google Docs a lot. Mm-hmm. So when the folks go out into breakout groups, they're working on Google Docs, which the faculty are monitoring in the background. And so the faculty can see the progress that they're making on the whatever the task or assignment was. And that's very valuable. And then the faculty can bring that back into the plenary discussion. So it's just been really fun and remarkable to see how the faculty just pick up on different possibilities, and then my staff can help spread that learning across the different programs.
A couple of years ago, you and I were talking about how the goal is really for each of these leaders to go back and to share at, I'll call it the next level of their organization, or multiple levels in their organization, or more broadly in their organization, and how to potentially do that. I'm imagining, and I'd be interested if you've heard any feedback yet, but that the network that you've created, which is online with the different participants in the classes, if you've, in a sense, seeded an easier way for them to share and distribute, or to use what they've learned in output form in the organizations that they lead.
That is a really interesting question, and I'm going to give that some more thought. To be honest, we've been so focused on just making sure that the people that are with us are having a good and valuable experience that I haven't really honestly thought that much about that. We have been thinking about how to sustain the community of our own alumni more effectively going forward. And I feel like this moment that we're in has enabled that kind of thinking in a way that we couldn't have done before. I mean, another thing about executive education, you know, our population is a little bit older. They haven't, you know, they're not the early adopters of digital everything. These are not digital natives in most cases. So I think there was some resistance to online learning before we started.
Yeah.
But, you know, as we said earlier, I think many of our target audience, they kind of said, well, either I do it this way or I can't do it at all. And so they were more willing to give it a try. And I really think they've come around. So there's no going back.
I agree. So in that vein, if we think much longer term, 2022 and beyond, assuming we may have a vaccination population that makes it safe to have a choice again, what are some of the things you think are, like you said, the no going back? You know, what are some things that are here to stay, or what are some, you know, continued evolutions that happen that are different going forward?
Yeah. Well, I was being a little bit flip because I do believe that people will want to come to our campuses again. I do think that there will always be, especially in executive education, a demand for that. I think people really enjoy it, especially at a place like Harvard. People really just love the experience of being in Cambridge. I love it too. I haven't been there in a long time. But I think the way we teach will be very different. So many of our faculty who've invested in creating asynchronous learning materials, I think we'll be using those as kind of pre-program level setting preparation kind of work. I think they'll be using them as homework in the evening. I think that'll definitely happen. I feel like when I look at where we were before, which was, you know, more than 90% on campus, where we are right now, 100% online. When I look to FY23, I think it'll probably be, I'm guessing, 60-40. I think 60% of our programs will have a significant on-campus component. 40 will probably remain fully online. Mm-hmm. And even the ones that are on campus, I think will be blended, will be more of a blended approach.
Mm-hmm. And if you could expand your comments, you do think about the world because of the nature of the institution you're at. What are some thoughts you have about higher ed as a whole, or the role of higher ed in helping the world? Because the world is in great need right now.
Yeah. Of course, we can always do more. One of the things that I've always loved about my job, you know, in doing executive education at a place like Harvard and for the public sector, is I do feel like I am bringing Harvard to the world, and always have felt that way, even more so now, because as I mentioned, because of the lower prices, and the more that expands the reach further than it had been before. We've also been working with our colleagues at Harvard X, which is the sort of the free massive online learning platform affiliated with edX. We've been working with them to take some of our content and move it onto that platform as well. So I think that stuff is going to continue to grow, continue to be important. And then funny, I was listening to the radio today and I heard that the number of applications for the Harvard freshman class was dramatically higher this year than it had ever been before. That totally surprised me. I hadn't heard that internally. I heard it on the radio. I was just really thinking about that. And what does that mean for how, you know, young people that age and their families are thinking about higher ed in the future? I don't know what it means. You have kids that age, Lee. Maybe you have more insight than I do.
I do. There's a lot of bottled up, pent up desire from I'll call it an education interrupted, or a lost year, however you want to describe that. And that education interrupted in almost a 3-year period of, I'll call it sophomores, juniors in high school, all the way through to freshmen in college last year. all were significantly impacted and also are going to have impacts to that admission cycle. So that whole 3-year group, or maybe even a 4-year group, has been dramatically affected. So, but I do think there's some pent up demand, because I think the enrollment numbers are anywhere from 19 to 30% drops this year in terms of enrollments for undergrad. So I think we'll see some rebound from that for a year, and then I don't know what to expect after that.
Yeah.
So
I will say, again, from the executive education perspective, I think the priority that all the higher ed institutions they're putting the priority on their degree students, their undergraduates and their graduate degree students. And so that also, when I plan forward into this coming fiscal year, which I think you're going to ask me about, I think the return of executive education back to campus will be slower than the return of the degree students, just because of the residual health concerns and the fact that an exec ed population, in our world at least, they're mixed right in to the whole campus community. And so an executive education population is more transient. It's new people coming from all over the world every week. I think the appetite for that on the part of the administration will be a little less. They'll just be more cautious and more wanting to protect the health and well-being of the full-time degree students. And that makes sense to me.
Right. Well, thank you, Debra. And any other closing, final thoughts that you'd have?
Well, I thank you for asking me to do this. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing what my colleagues have had to say when you put this all together. Because we live in a policy world at the Kennedy School, everyone's been quoting that famous statement about, never let a good crisis go to waste. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like this has created opportunity for us to think differently, to embrace some things that we were perhaps postponing. And I think we're all going to be better off for it in the long run. So having a conversation like this is really helpful. It just helps me remember that there's a lot of good coming out of this. And I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much, Debra. And this has been another Mindmaxing podcast with Debra Iles from Harvard Kennedy School.